Pack your things, Quinn. You're incompetent, my father sneered, handing my CEO position to my brother who couldn't even read a balance sheet. That sentence, uttered by the man I had idolized for 30 years, hung in the air of the boardroom like toxic smoke. It wasn't just the words, it was the casual cruelty of them. My name is Quinn Williams, and my father, Robert Williams, sat at the head of the mahogany table, not even looking me in the eye. He was looking at his cuticles, as if destroying my life was a mundane task on his to-do list, right between dry cleaning and lunch reservation. Next to him sat Caleb, my younger brother, the golden boy. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, grinning like a shark that had just smelled blood. Caleb, who had spent his 20s partying in Ibiza on the company dime while I was in the office until 3 a.m. fixing supply chain disasters. Caleb, who once asked me what EBITDA meant during a quarterly review. The board members, mostly old friends of my father, stared at the table. They knew the truth. They knew who had actually doubled the company's revenue in the last 5 years. They knew who had steered Williams Logistics through the shipping crisis without losing a single major client. But they were cowards. They were yes men who preferred the status quo and the free golf trips my father provided over integrity. Incompetent, I repeated, my voice steady, though my hands were trembling beneath the table. Is that what we're calling a 40% profit increase since I took over operations? My father finally looked up. His eyes were cold, void of the warmth I remembered from childhood. You lack vision, Quinn. You're a grinder, a worker bee. We need leadership. We need charisma. Caleb has that modern touch. Modern touch? I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Dad, Caleb tried to invest the company pension fund into a crypto scheme last month. I had to block the transfer physically. See? Caleb interjected, leaning back with arrogant ease. She's obstructionist. She doesn't understand the new economy. She's holding us back, Dad. My father nodded at Caleb as if he had just recited Shakespeare. It's done, Quinn. The board has voted. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties as Chief Operating Officer. Your shares will be bought back at the base rate outlined in your contract. Security is waiting to escort you out. The betrayal hit me physically, like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just about the job. It was the erasure. I had given everything to Williams Logistics. I had no husband, no kids, no hobbies. I was 32 years old and my entire identity was wrapped up in making my father proud, in building his legacy. I had cleaned up Caleb's messes since we were children. I did his homework, I bailed him out of jail, I covered for him when he crashed the company car, and this was my reward. I stood up. I didn't cry. I refused to give them that satisfaction. I smoothed down my skirt, picked up my tablet, and looked at the room one last time. You're making a mistake, I said quietly. Not a personal one, a financial one. We'll manage without you, sweetie, Caleb said, winking. I walked out of that boardroom and the heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, severing the cord to the only life I knew. The walk to the elevator was the longest of my life. The employees I passed, people I had hired, people I had mentored, looked away, pretending to be busy. They knew. News travels fast in a corporate environment. I was a pariah before I even hit the lobby. I went to my office, packed a single box with my personal effects, a photo of my mom who had passed away 10 years ago, my degree, and a lucky pen, and left. I didn't take any files. I didn't steal any client lists. I didn't delete any databases. I left everything intact. I wanted there to be no excuses when they failed. The first month was a blur of depression and rage. I sat in my apartment staring at the wall, replaying the scene over and over. I watched my bank account swell with the buyout money, a significant sum, but shut up and go away money. My father thought that check would buy my silence and my compliance. He thought I would go on a long vacation, find a husband, and settle into a life of quiet irrelevance. But he forgot who I was. I wasn't just his daughter. I was the person he had trained to be a killer in business, even if he didn't realize he'd done it. About 6 weeks in, my phone rang. It was David, the VP of operations at Williams Logistics. He was calling from a burner phone. "Quinn," he whispered, "it's a disaster." "Tell me," I said. sipping my coffee, feeling the first spark of life return to my veins. Caleb fired the compliance team. He said they were vibe killers and that automation could handle the regulatory filings. We missed the deadline for the hazmat transport renewal. The trucks are grounded in 3 states. I closed my eyes and let out a long breath. It had started. What is Dad doing? He's in the Hamptons. He says Caleb needs room to learn. He says it's just growing pains. Thanks for telling me, David. Quinn, are you coming back? We need you. No, I said firmly. I'm not coming back to save them. I'm moving forward. That afternoon, I registered a new LLC. I called it QW Solutions. I didn't rent a fancy office. I worked out of my living room. I didn't hire a massive staff. I hired 2 people. A brilliant logistics coordinator named Sarah, who had been overlooked by my father because she had tattoos, and a fierce legal shark named Marcus, who hated the old boys club network. I didn't go after the small fish. I went for the throat. My first target was Henderson Manufacturing. They were Williams Logistics' oldest and largest client. Mr. Henderson was a man of principle. Old school, the kind of guy who shook hands and meant it. He had tolerated my father's arrogance because I delivered results. I set up a meeting, not in a boardroom, but at the diner where Mr. Henderson liked to have breakfast every Tuesday. I knew his schedule, I knew his order. When I walked in, he looked up from his eggs, surprised. Quinn, I heard you were taking a sabbatical. I was fired, Arthur, I said, sliding into the booth opposite him. For incompetence. He snorted. You incompetent? You're the only reason my supply chain didn't collapse during the pandemic. What really happened? My father wanted a son on the throne, I said simply, but that's family drama. I'm here for business. I know your contract with Williams is up for renewal in 90 days. It is, he said, putting down his fork. And I know that since I left, your on-time delivery rate has dropped by 15%. I know you had a shipment of raw materials stuck in Ohio last week because of a paperwork error. He sighed, looking tired. It's been a headache, Quinn. I called your brother. He told me to chill out and that he'd send me a bottle of scotch. I don't have a bottle of scotch for you, Arthur, but I have a guarantee. Move your business to QW Solutions. I'll beat their price by 5%, and I will personally oversee your account. No bureaucracy, no vibes, just logistics. He looked at me for a long moment. You're asking me to bet on a startup against a legacy firm? I am the legacy, I said intensely. The name on the building is Williams, but the brain that ran it is sitting right here. He extended his hand. Send me the contract. That was the first domino. When Henderson Manufacturing left Williams Logistics, it sent a shockwave through the industry. My father called me the day the news broke. What are you thinking you're doing? He screamed into the phone. I hadn't heard his voice in 4 months. Hello to you too, Dad, I said, typing away on my laptop. You stole Henderson. That is theft. I will sue you into the ground. I didn't steal anything. He was a free agent. His contract was expiring. He chose the better service provider. Isn't that the free market you always lecture about? You're trying to hurt the family, he spat. I am the family, I corrected him. Or I was until you threw me out like trash. How's Caleb doing, by the way? I heard he bought a company jet while the ground transport fleet is rusting. He hung up on me. Over the next year, the war escalated, but it was a lopsided war. Caleb was fighting with ego. I was fighting with data. I knew the weaknesses of Williams Logistics better than anyone. I knew their software was outdated. I knew their middle management was bloated. I knew which suppliers were unhappy with late payments. I systematically poached their best talent. It wasn't hard. People want to work for winners, and they want to work for leaders who respect them. David, the VP of Operations, came over to my side within 6 months. He brought 3 senior analysts with him. It's a circus over there, Quinn, David told me on his first day at QW Solutions, which was now located in a sleek, modern office downtown. Caleb shows up at noon, hungover. He's trying to pivot the company into lifestyle branding. He wants to sell Williams Logistics hoodies and water bottles. Meanwhile, we lost the pharmaceutical account because a refrigerated truck failed and spoiled $2 million of insulin. Did they have insurance? I asked. Lapsed.
David said grimly. Caleb forgot to sign the check.
My heart broke a little. Not for Caleb, but for the drivers and warehouse workers who were going to suffer. That was the tragedy of nepotism. It wasn't just the unqualified heir who failed, it was the hundreds of families relying on that paycheck who paid the price. I ramped up my aggression. I started undercutting them on every bid. I knew their margins. I knew exactly how low I could go to bleed them while keeping myself profitable. My company was lean, agile, and hungry. Theirs was a dinosaur, weighed down by overhead and executive bonuses. The family gatherings stopped. I wasn't invited to Christmas or Thanksgiving, which was fine by me. I spent the holidays working, building, planning. I saw photos on social media, though. Caleb posting pictures of new sports cars, my father looking older, more tired, his smile forced. 2 years after I was fired, the rumors started swirling. Williams Logistics was having liquidity issues. They were late paying vendors. Drivers were striking because of cut benefits. I watched from my corner office, looking out over the city skyline. I had built QW Solutions into a powerhouse. We were now the third largest logistics firm in the region. Williams was still number one on paper, but they were rotting from the inside out. Then came the mistake that ended it all. Caleb, in a desperate attempt to cover up the massive losses from the pharmaceutical disaster and the lost Henderson contract, entered into a high-risk merger with an overseas shipping conglomerate. He didn't do due diligence. He didn't read the fine print. The conglomerate was a shell company involved in smuggling. When the feds raided the Williams Logistics warehouse, it was national news. I watched it on the TV in the break room. My father was led out in handcuffs for questioning, looking frail and confused. Caleb was nowhere to be found. Rumor had it he was on a yacht in the Mediterranean, dodging calls. My father wasn't charged. He truly was ignorant of the crime, just guilty of negligence, but the company's reputation was incinerated. Their stock price plummeted 90% in a week. Creditors were circling like vultures. The bank called the loans. It was time. I called my lawyer, Marcus. "Get the paperwork ready. We're making an offer." "Hostile?" Marcus asked. "Friendly," I said coldly, "or as friendly as a shark can be to a drowning sailor. I want to buy the debt. All of it." It took 3 days to set up the meeting. I didn't reach out to my father directly. I went through the bankruptcy administrators. They were desperate for a buyer who could save the jobs of the 2,000 employees. They didn't care about the family name. They cared about solvency. The meeting was scheduled at the old Williams Logistics headquarters, the same building I had been escorted out of. I drove there myself. I wore a white suit, sharp, pristine, professional. The security guard at the front desk was old Mr. Miller. He had been there for 20 years. When he saw me, his jaw dropped. "Miss Quinn?" he stammered. "Good morning, Mr. Miller." I smiled. "I'm here for a meeting." They said you were the buyer?" "That's right." He looked at me, and then he stood up and saluted. "Good to have you home, ma'am." I took the elevator up. The hallway felt different this time. The air was stale. The plants were dying. The energy was gone. I walked into the boardroom, the same mahogany table, the same chairs. My father was there. He looked 10 years older. He was slumped in his chair. Caleb was there too, surprisingly. He had flown back, looking disheveled, his arrogance replaced by terrified sweating. There were lawyers everywhere. When I walked in, silence slammed into the room. My father looked up. His eyes widened. He stood up, trembling. "Quinn, what are you doing here?" "I'm the CEO of QW Solutions," I said, placing my briefcase on the table. "The entity that just purchased the distressed debt of Williams Logistics from your primary lender." "You?" Caleb squeaked. "You don't have that kind of money." "You'd be amazed what you can earn when you actually work, Caleb," I said, not even looking at him. I kept my eyes on my father. "You did this," my father whispered. "You destroyed us." "No, Dad," I said, my voice rising just enough to command the room. "I didn't destroy you. I competed with you. You destroyed yourself when you fired the only person who knew how to run this ship and replaced her with a child who wanted to play executive. You destroyed yourself when you chose biology over competence." I opened the briefcase and slid a folder across the table.
This is the buyout agreement. It absorbs Williams Logistics into QW Solutions. We keep the warehouses, the fleet, and the staff. The brand Williams Logistics will be retired. It's too toxic now. And the family? My father asked, his voice cracking. What about my shares? Your shares are worthless, Dad. The company is insolvent. This is a rescue of the assets, not the equity. However, I paused, looking at the man who had raised me, the man who had discarded me. I am not you. I am not cruel. The agreement includes a modest stipend for you, enough to retire comfortably, not lavishly, comfortably. And me? Caleb asked, finding a shred of his old entitlement. What's my role? Vice president? Consultant? I turned to my brother. I looked him up and down, taking in the designer watch he had bought with money he hadn't earned. You have no role, Caleb. You are barred from the premises, effective immediately. You can't do that, Caleb shouted, standing up. Dad, tell her.
My father looked from Caleb to me. He looked at the paperwork. He looked at the bankruptcy lawyers who were nodding, indicating he had no choice. The reality of his failure finally washed over him. He realized that his blind spot for his son had cost him his life's work. Sign it, Robert, the bank's lawyer said gently. It's the only way to avoid liquidation. My father picked up the pen. His hand shook. He looked at me one last time, tears welling in his eyes. There was no anger left, just shame, deep, crushing shame. I'm sorry, Quinn, he whispered. I know, I said, but apologies don't balance the books. He signed. Caleb tried to protest, but security, the same security team he had once ordered to escort me out, stepped forward. They didn't wait for his command, they looked to me. I gave a small nod. Please escort Mr. Williams out of the building, I said. As Caleb was dragged out, screaming about how it wasn't fair, I sat down at the head of the table, my father's chair. It was still warm. My father stood up, looking like a ghost. He shuffled toward the door, leaving the keys to the office on the table. He paused at the threshold. You're just like me, he said. No, I replied, opening the file to start the reorganization. I'm better than you, because I know the value of the people doing the work. He left. I was alone in the boardroom. I took a deep breath. It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like joy. It felt like closure. It felt like the balance had finally been restored. I picked up the internal phone. David? I said. Yes, boss? Send out a company-wide memo. All jobs are safe. Full audit of safety protocols begins tomorrow, and reinstatement of the pension fund. We have a lot of work to do. Copy that? Welcome back, Quinn. I hung up the phone and walked to the window. I looked down at the parking lot. I saw my father's car pulling away, followed by Caleb's flashy sports car. They were leaving. I turned back to the room. The name on the wall still said Williams Logistics, but by tomorrow, the painters would be here. It would say QW Solutions. My dad fired me for my brother because he thought I was incompetent. I bought his company to prove that competence is the only currency that matters. And now, I had a business to run.